Hi, my name is Ron Lugbell, and I'm going to explain to you a whole new paradigm for learning and for education. That almost every class you've ever taken, almost every school you've ever been to, that the method has been a unit study. You study topic A, and then topic B, and then topic C, and then topic D. That it seems logical, it makes sense. You do one topic, then the next, and then the following one, and that way it's organized, and then you might have a test at the end of it, and the test is to evaluate you. You study for the test and see um, whether you have really learned the things that you're supposed to learn, and that's kind of the normal mode of education. I'm not here to criticize teachers or the education system or anything. I'm just here to explain a different way of doing things, a whole new paradigm, completely different method. One of the most overlooked, yet most highly proven thing in education is that spaced practice is better than mass practice. That you retain things better if you space out the learning rather than learn things all at once. In other words, if you take a cram course and all you do is study one subject for 2 weeks, well, you're likely to have forgotten that, say, to a large extent, a year later. But if you spread that out over a year, the same material, but say you just have it once a week or so, you're going to be able to retain that material better. That you can look up the research on that, but it's been proven over the last 100 years, lots of studies, that spaced practice, the retention is better. And we all kind of intuitively know that. With all those things that we learned in high school or college, whatever, that we did it, and then after the exam was over, we forgot it. And so this idea that you do topic A, and then topic B, and then topic C, and then topic D, then you have a test. Well, it isn't the most effective method. That what you can do is simply start out, say you have an hour-long class, you do topic A for 15 minutes every day, you do topic B for 15 minutes, topic C for 15 minutes, and topic D for 15 minutes. It actually keeps the interest higher anyhow and forces the teacher to condense the information on each of these topics. And you keep hitting those topics every single time. And so you have, at the end of the same period of time, 4 months or whatever, you have a month for each topic, that you would be studying each topic every single day. Every time you had class, you'd be studying each of those topics. And at the end, when you take the test, you won't have forgotten things from the very first topic, like 4 months later, and then you got to go back and relearn it for the test. That it should be pretty fresh in your mind. That it's the spaced repetition. That there's even the spaced repetition systems that you can get, online flashcards to study any subject with Anki or one of these online flashcard systems, and they, rather than doing it every single time, they do it at certain intervals. Say, for example, there might be a subject where the knowledge builds on prior knowledge. For example, possibly in math, that might be an issue, that you simply can't start out studying the most advanced topic on the first day because you need to master the beginning topics along the way. But what you can do, for example, Saxon Math does this and is very successful, is you can continuously review prior material as you go into new material. So that when you're doing the second topic, topic B, in the second month? Well, you'll be reviewing some of the material you learned in the first month. And then when you're in topic C in the third month, you'll be reviewing some of the things that you learned in the first 2 months. In topic 4, you would be reviewing, at the same time you're learning new material, you are also reviewing some of the older material so that it stays fresh in your mind and you don't just forget it. That's another approach, is a continuous review sort of approach. Another topic, this is another new paradigm. We usually think of testing as being an assessment, an evaluation of where you stand, of how good you are, how much you've learned. And so at the end of a class, you might have a test. Another one of the most proven things in education, again, you can go back years on this. There's a lot of research to support it, meta-analysis, that it's, they did research in the students. Some did like study, test, and then some did study, test. In other words, instead of doing study sessions, they were testing themselves. And they retained the information better when they repeatedly tested themselves on it instead of repeatedly studying the material. So that there's just the testing effect means that you do better. And we often tell our students that, rather than just kind of looking through your notes, test yourself on it. There's different ways you can do that. You can say, you can look at, when I was in law school, we did old practice tests. That there's some in the library where you could just go and get some old practice tests and do them. Or you can also, when my daughter was in high school, she would just hand me her notebook and say, just ask me questions. And I would just ask her, what's a neutron, what's an atom, what's this and what's that. And then she would have to come up with an answer. It's a way of testing yourself. Or you can do that on your own. You don't necessarily need to have a partner. Just write down the names and some key items, and then put away your notes and then test yourself on it. And through the repeated testing, that you will do better than if you just run over your notes. And so we tell students to do that, but teachers or professors can do that themselves. That you can give your students a test ahead of time. That you give them a practice test. You can do it in class or you do it out of class, whatever works for your situation. And every situation is unique. I understand every educational situation is unique. I've taught lots of different things in different countries, different ways. I've taught, kayaking and skiing, and I've taught French, and I've taught English, and I've taught all kinds of different things in different countries, even in France and Taiwan and United States and various places. And so I understand each situation is unique. However, this does work. That you would give the students the test ahead of time, a practice test. It doesn't have to necessarily be exactly the same as the real test, but something similar to what the real test would be. And they do it in class. I usually would do it for a participation grade, just so that they would do it. And it also provides a little bit of shock value, so that then it's like, oh, I only got a 56 on this practice test. I better really study for this test, instead of getting that 56 on the real test, and then there's nothing you can do except maybe beg the teacher, oh, can I do a retest? That they understand, oh, I'm not at the level I want to be at, and so they study for it. And I did try doing multiple practice tests, and the students were not very excited about that. That was my particular situation. Yours might be different. I didn't have any problems with I would actually give them the practice test ahead of time so that they could study before the practice test. And so some of them would do the practice test on their own, and then come in, and so they were ready to do the practice test. And you see, it's one of these things, if you start out higher on your practice test, and then you do a little bit better on the final test, you can have a better grade. Then if you start out lower on the practice test, and you do a little bit better, and then you're just here instead of up here where you really want to be. So the students who did study that, it helped them. Conceivably we could do it where I give them a take-home practice test, and I give them, credit as an assignment for doing that, and then we do it in class, and then we do the actual test. That would give them 3 tests. Whatever information you want them to know, you put on the test, and you repeatedly test them on it, instead of you just continuously lecturing or having them do assignments or whatever. Those are all good, but if you can condense those down, so then you've got a little bit more, an extra day to do a practice test. I find, we have this mindset, I think, that testing is all about assessment, and we need to change that. You learn through testing. Having all the students sit at their desk quietly working on a test is an excellent learning method, that they are testing themselves, and they learn a lot through the test. That I consider it an excellent learning technique, and if you look at the research on the testing effect, you will see the same thing. So to summarize, do do space practice instead of the mass practice. Our whole education system is based on this unit study principle, which does not have a research basis. There might be some things where you really need to dive in deeply. Say if you got a lab in science and you can't do multiple things on that day, you need the whole time period to do your lab. Well, that's great. Or if there's a project that has to be done in school, a lot of projects you can just have students do outside of school. But if there's a project that has to be done in school, you could take the whole, but you could do those. You don't have to do those every single day. That once in a while you make an exception, but generally you would cover all the topics for the semester on the same day. And you can do, say if you had 10 topics over the semester, you could do 10 6-minute mini lessons. Just condense that information down to 6 minutes. You can do it. Teachers like to drone on and on. It's boring for the students. They're not really picking up much. Condense it down to 6 minutes. Cover every single topic, every single day. And the other thing that this does is it, we put the learning objectives. The student will be able to, by the end of this class. Again, that's something that has no research support. That the students aren't going to be able to master all this information on the first class, but you repeat it day after day after day, and they do it like 20 times during the semester, they are going to retain that stuff. You do it once back in September, they get tested in December on the material, they've forgotten it. I don't care what you did back in September, they've forgotten it unless they study and they go back and retrieve that information. So the testing effect is important. Also, that they're giving the students multiple tests. Like, it might make sense to condense that semester down and then give them multiple tests before their final tests, as a way to practice it. And the last couple class sessions, have them be practice tests. And then you're going to have a higher level on that final exam than you would if you just threw it at them. And it's just up to them to study for it. And because I found that if I give them the practice test before the actual test, well, even the ones that don't study are still getting C's on the final, on the test, because of the testing effect on the practice test. I take care to change it a little bit, like even if it's like the same questions, I put them in a different order because you don't want the students to be memorizing the order. And this works for different kinds of tests. In other words, I do oral testing It works for that too. I do essay questions. It works for that too. I do fill in the blank. It works for that too. And that I don't do multiple choice questions, but it would work for that also. I think any type of question you have, it would still work. So I would highly recommend looking into both the spaced repetition and the testing effect, and see if you can apply that in your courses, in your classroom, in your lessons, whatever you're teaching. See if there's ways that you can make that work. It's a totally new, different paradigm. I know administrators won't like it, because they won't even understand what your objective is. You're going through like 10 different objectives. Like, they don't get it. And like, well, why aren't you just doing it like one objective today and another and then another, and you get to the end of the thing, and that for some reason these are ignored effects in education, and you just have to find a way to deal with the administrator, or just prepare a normal lesson for them when they come in and observe you, but it will prepare the students. They will retain the information better if they just simply get it more times. They're going to have that same information repeated a whole bunch of times throughout the semester or the year, and so it's going to be in their brains. It isn't like something that just happened a couple months ago and then it's out of their brains by the end of the semester. That they will retain that because they've heard it so many times. But the repetition is on different days. If you did like a 6-minute lesson, and then you repeated that same lesson 10 times during the same lesson, that would be incredibly boring, and the kids wouldn't understand it. No one would understand why you're repeating the same thing 10 different times, because one right after the other, because they already know it. They just had it. But if you do it, the next day or a couple days later, and it's kind of brief, to the point, students can kind of deal with anything if it's in just 5 minutes or 10 minutes max for high school. And continuously moving to a different topic kind of gets their interest back up again. That if you drone on and on about the same thing for 20, 30 minutes, well, the students have learned just as much as if you'd only talked about it for 5 minutes. Or also students are going to, if you give them an assignment, they're going to lengthen that assignment to fill whatever space. But if you say, no, it's due in 5 minutes, then boom, they hand it in 5 minutes. They're going to get to work on it. And boom, it has to be in. And so it's just a more efficient and a more interesting way to use your time. It's like, oh, we're learning about electricity. Oh, now we're learning about weather. Okay, now we're learning about magnetism. Whatever your various topics are, you just go boom, boom, boom through them. That, if it's English teaching, which is what I'm more familiar with, it might be something where you do vocabulary for 5 minutes. You might do grammar for 5 minutes. You might do a read aloud for 5 minutes. You might do silent reading for 10 minutes. You might, so you just kind of go through like a series of topics like that, a series of activities, which you probably do anyhow. But this, I must say, you're used to like the present, practice, produce kind of thing, the I do, we do, you do sort of approach to teaching. Most teachers are used to that anyway. You might have a different approach. You might do project-based learning, or you might do task-based learning, or you might do expeditionary learning, or something like that. But a lot of teachers are used to the present, produce, practice, produce sort of model. And so if you want to do that, you can still do that. It's just you do it on different days. You do the present one day, practice one day, and then the produce the following day. So you're just doing a part of the lesson each day, which some of this stuff may not intuitively make sense to you, but if you recall back in your high school days, when you were in high school, every time after you took that test, you asked the kid, you asked yourself a month later, if you remember that stuff, or a year later, you did not remember that stuff. Everyone says that. Everyone knows that as students. They all know they forget it. And so this is a way to increase the retention. So, I mean, isn't that the aim of education? So these students actually retain the information, not just learn it and forget it, learn it and forget it, learn it and forget it, which is what we all do. That's exactly what's wrong with the whole education process, is they learn and forget. They learn and forget. And this is a way to stop that, to have these students retain the information. Because I'll tell you, over the summer, over the summer, these kids forget most of what they learned from the year before. And so then you got to rebuild back up just to get where they were at the end of last year. But if you can use some methods that would increase the retention, such as the space practice and the testing effect, that will improve the student learning. And that's what we're looking for. And I think the students also enjoy it. I mean, the students enjoyed my classes. That they appreciated the practice test. I'm telling them, this is what's going to be on the test. Instead of them guessing, here's the anxiety that students have is because of the uncertainty. They go into the test and they're like, oh, I'm not sure what's going to be on the test. I don't know how I'm going to do. My students, they did the practice test. They know exactly how they're going to do. There's no uncertainty because they already did it. And so some of them might not have done very well on the practice test, and so they know, if they study, they're going to do a little bit better. Actually, even if they don't study, they're going to do a little bit better. I've practically never had somebody do worse. I don't know if I've ever had somebody do worse on the real test than they did on the practice test, even without studying. That it just doesn't happen because you learn by doing the practice test, with or without feedback. That you can, give the students feedback, and that's good. My experience is, you put a lot of corrections on that test. All they do is they look at the number and then they throw it away, or they put it away, whatever. That they don't even look at the feedback very much. So I've seen some of the research, and anyway, that the feedback I think is less important than the testing effect. The testing effect is a definite thing, and it definitely works. As I said before, though, I did try doing 2 practice tests, and the students kind of rebelled against it. I mean, some of the students at least were, it's kind of boring, right? And so I understand that. And so I just do the 1 practice test, which they understood this is to help them so they do better on the test, and also explain to them, it just takes away the anxiety. There's no anxiety going into that test because they know exactly what's going to be on it. The first time they do it, there isn't much anxiety because they know it's not the real test, right? So it's not so high stakes. And the second time, well, they don't have to think about what's going to be on the test. It's the practice test is a little bit like a study guide. And as a matter of fact, that's what the students would call it. It's like, can I have a study guide? So, whatever they want to call it, I call it a practice test because in my experience, like I said, in law school or in other situations I've been in, say, when you're practicing a sport, if you can do a real simulation of a game, that's going to improve your performance in an actual game. That if you go into a basketball game and you've never played a basketball game, regardless of how much practice and drills you've done on shooting, on your passing drills, on your dribbling drills, on doing your plays or defense or rebounding, those are all just drills, all right? That it's good, it's fine, but unless you've played that actual game, you are not going to do that great in your first basketball game. Speaking of which, if any of you coach a sport, you do this in your sport. You don't do an entire practice session where, all we're doing today is free throws. And we're going to do 1,000 free throws. And then tomorrow, because that's our learning objective today, is to achieve 80% on free throws, for example. And then tomorrow, we're going to practice dribbling. And we're going to dribble. And so our learning objectives, the students shall, be able to dribble up and down the court without a mistake using both hands. And then at the end, you kind of evaluate them and you see them, and it's like, boom, we checked that off, So the observer is going to think that I'm this great coach. No coach does that, right? Okay, and teachers shouldn't do it either. I mean, maybe on a rare occasion, maybe there's exceptions, such as I mentioned with the lab or something. But no, a coach goes through a series of activities. Yeah, you might work on layups, then you might work on passing, then you might work on defense, you might work on rebounding, and then you play a scrimmage, and then you might do some sprints, something like that. Just an example. I coach some too, but I used to play basketball. Anyway, the point is that coaches don't isolate just one skill because it just isn't as effective. The athletes will get bored, and the drill works for 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes or something. A scrimmage, you can go longer, obviously, but if you're just isolating skills, you go beyond like 5 or 10 minutes, it's just not going to be very effective at that point. You need to move on to something else. And that's kind of what I'm saying, is you keep moving on. Instead of having like one objective, you got like 5 or 6 or 10 objectives that you're doing during that class period. And this is, I know it's a completely different paradigm. And and the coach also knows he needs to have some scrimmages or some kind of practice games before the athletes are really performing at their best. That the very first game, if they've never done scrimmage and they've never had any games before, they're just not going to go out there and win the game, right? That you need to kind of do some actual practice of the real thing. And so if any guys are sports coaches, just apply what you do with the athletes, with your students. Do the same thing, or the same sort of methods. That you go through like a series of different things, and you also do the actual thing that you want the students to be able to do. For example, with English, you want them to be able to read with comprehension, right? And so if the students are never reading, or rarely reading, that's probably not going to happen if you're just teaching the series of skills. Okay, we're going to work on phonics. Okay, we're going to work on fluency. Okay, we're going to work on writing, and we're going to work on this sound, and we're going to do that other thing. And they've never actually really read. I mean, those are all good things, but they need to spend some time doing the actual thing, kind of putting it together, and not waiting. It's like, okay, well, they'll do that, later, during, when they're in, the next year or something. No, it's kind of like the basketball team. They kind of need to be playing some games, and they need to be doing some scrimmages. It's the same thing with your students. They need to be doing the actual thing. So yeah, the science teachers, you probably want them to be doing labs, and that's good. That's important. But you can also, you're probably not doing labs every single day, and so you can do. And I'm not a science teacher. I don't know exactly how that works, but maybe some of these principles could apply to you as well. Because if you're an evidence-based person, all I'm asking you to do is go online and just Google testing effect. Google mass practice versus space practice, and you'll see study after study. This isn't really, it's not a controversy. These are clearly well researched topics. For some reason that they haven't been applied in school. I guess it's maybe easier, and it maybe makes some kind of logical sense. Oh, all we're doing is this thing today, and you've been taught and trained to put that objective on the board, and that's what administrators are looking for, and that's what the state standard is. It's like this day, I'm supposed to be teaching this thing, and so that's what I do. And you do exactly as you're told, and it doesn't work because the kids forget it all. And so I know this is maybe radical different for some of you, but go ahead, look it up and see if you can work in some of these things, testing effect and the spaced practice, into your teaching. Thank you.